My name is Haley Monroe, and I'm 34 years old. I've always been the kind of person who tries to keep my family close, the one who remembers birthdays, checks in when someone's quiet for too long, and makes sure we're all okay, even when I'm not. So when my mom called me last Sunday, sounding unusually tired, it stayed with me. She brushed it off, blaming her arthritis and the damp weather. But her voice had that thin, wavering quality I remembered from the year Dad died. The kind where she's trying to sound strong, but the truth is leaking through the cracks. By Tuesday morning, I couldn't shake it. I decided to surprise her with lunch. Nothing extravagant, just a couple of sandwiches from her favorite cafe, a place that still wrapped their food in wax paper and gave you extra pickles without asking. I told myself it was just a nice gesture. But if I'm being honest, it was more than that. I needed to see her face and hear with my own ears that she was okay. The day was perfect driving weather, late spring, sun high but not oppressive, the kind of warmth that makes you roll the windows down and let the wind tangle your hair. My little blue SUV hummed along the road as I sipped my coffee and mentally rehearsed what I might say to cheer Mom up. Maybe we'd sit out on her porch swing like we used to, gossip about the neighbors, or talk about the recipe she'd been trying to perfect for years. Her neighborhood is one of those small, tree-lined streets where every house feels like it has history. Kids leave their bikes in the front yard without worry, and you can smell someone grilling almost every weekend. It's the kind of place that feels safe, maybe too safe. I turned the corner onto her street, already picturing her face lighting up when she saw me with lunch in hand. But that's when my stomach did a little somersault. There, sitting crooked in her driveway, was a silver Ford Fusion. Not just any silver Ford Fusion. Dylan's silver Ford Fusion. I slowed the car instinctively, blinking like maybe my eyes were playing tricks. But no, it was definitely his. The back bumper still had the little dent from where someone in the grocery store parking lot had backed into him last year. My first thought was confusion, not suspicion. Maybe he decided to check on Mom too? That would be sweet but strange. He was supposed to be at work, and his office was an hour away in the opposite direction. He never mentioned coming here, and Dylan wasn't exactly the spontaneous type. I pulled my car over to the curb across the street and just sat there for a moment, the cafe bag warm on the passenger seat beside me. I tried to reason it out. Could Mom have called him for help with something? Maybe she needed something heavy moved? Maybe her sink was leaking? Those were things Dylan was always happy to do. But then my eyes caught something else, something that made the skin on my arms prickle. On the porch, just to the right of Mom's welcome mat, sat Dylan's brown leather work shoes. The ones he only wore on days when he had important client meetings. They were neatly placed side by side, laces tucked in like he always did. I frowned. He never took his shoes off before going into Mom's house. She wasn't one of those no-shoes people. In fact, she hated the idea of guests walking around in socks because she thought it looked too casual. That was the moment my mind stopped thinking of sweet or innocent explanations. I unbuckled my seatbelt slowly, feeling that low, rolling unease building in my stomach. My hands were suddenly clammy against the steering wheel. Something about the sight of those shoes, combined with the fact that Dylan's car was here at all, set off a quiet alarm in my head. I picked up the lunch bag and stepped out of the car. The street was unusually quiet. No kids playing, no one mowing their lawn. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. As I walked toward the porch, I found myself studying the front windows. The curtains were drawn, which wasn't too unusual for Mom, but I thought I saw something, a flicker of movement in the shadowed gap where the two panels met. I stopped at the base of the steps, heart thudding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. For a split second, I considered turning around, telling myself I was overthinking. But then the curiosity and the gnawing sense that something was off pushed me forward. The bag of sandwiches felt heavier now as I climbed the steps and knocked lightly on the door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I glanced at Dylan's shoes again, then at the drawn curtains. A bead of sweat trickled down my back even though the breeze was cool. I pressed my ear lightly against the door, holding my breath. Nothing. I stepped back, scanning the front of the house, then walked down the steps toward the side path that led to the backyard. Mom's place was small enough that you could see the side kitchen window from the street if you knew where to look. As I rounded the side of the house, I noticed the kitchen window was cracked open just a sliver. That's when I heard it, muffled voices. Two voices. One was unmistakably my mother's, slower and softer than usual, but hers. The other, I'd know it anywhere. Dylan's. They weren't laughing. They weren't talking casually. It was quiet but urgent, their tones dipping low like they didn't want anyone to hear. My pulse started pounding in my ears. I couldn't make out the words, and in that moment, not knowing felt worse than whatever I might actually hear. I pulled my phone from my pocket and, without even thinking, dialed Dylan's number. From inside the house, just beyond the cracked window, I heard it, the faint buzz of his phone vibrating against a table. He didn't answer. And suddenly, the sandwiches didn't matter. The sunshine didn't matter. All I could feel was the question that had taken root in my mind and was growing by the second. Why is my husband here? And why are they acting like they don't want me to know? I stood there, my hand still holding my phone, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. From that cracked kitchen window, I could make out low voices, but the words were still swallowed up by the distance and the clinking of something. Glass? Silverware? I wasn't sure. A part of me wanted to storm through the front door and demand an explanation right there on the spot. But another part, the part that still hoped there was an innocent reason for this, told me to tread carefully. I walked back to the front of the house, the gravel crunching under my sandals louder than I liked. The air felt heavy, charged. I knocked on the front door again, this time with more force. Still nothing. Mom, I called, my voice sharper than I intended. Silence. I stepped back, looking up and down the street. Nothing. No cars passing, no neighbors outside watering their lawns. It was almost eerie, like the world had decided to pause just for this moment. I pulled out my phone again and texted Dylan. Me. Why are you at Mom's? No typing bubble appeared. I waited. Nothing. The longer I stood there, the more the confusion in my chest started to burn into something darker. Not full-blown rage yet, but the slow simmer of it, the kind that makes your jaw tighten. I circled around to the side of the house again. This time I stopped just under the kitchen window and strained to listen. I could make out bits and pieces now. Mom's voice was shaky. Dylan's was low and steady, like he was trying to calm her down. I still couldn't piece together what they were saying, but the tone, it wasn't casual. It wasn't neighborly favor talk. It was private. I'd backed away before either of them saw me. That's when I remembered the sliding glass door at the back. Mom never locked it unless she was leaving the house for the day. And from where I stood, I could already see through the gap between her fence and the garage that the curtains back there were slightly open. I walked down the narrow side path toward the backyard, my heart thumping faster with every step. My hands felt clammy against the lunch bag I still hadn't set down, as if holding onto it kept this moment anchored in normal life. I reached the sliding door, my reflection faint in the glass. The handle was turned ever so slightly unlocked. For a moment, I hesitated. Stepping through meant crossing a line, not just physically but emotionally. It meant admitting to myself that I no longer trusted either of them enough to knock and wait. But the voices in my head were relentless. Why are they hiding? Why didn't they answer the door? Why is his car here? I slid the door open just enough to step inside, the sound of it rolling on its track louder than I wanted. The air in the kitchen was warm, thick with the faint smell of coffee and something floral, probably Mom's hand lotion. They were both sitting at the small kitchen table, so engrossed in whatever they were talking about that they didn't even hear me at first. Dylan's head snapped up when I stepped forward. His face drained of color, and his eyes widened in that split second of shock before someone starts scrambling to explain. Mom looked different, smaller somehow. Her shoulders were slouched, her eyes glassy. On the table between them was a small pile of envelopes, most of them opened, their contents spilling slightly onto the table. My eyes caught the bold lettering of one in particular, past due, before Dylan quickly stacked them together, almost like he was shielding them from me. Haley, Dylan started, his voice uneven. We didn't expect. But Mom interrupted, her voice trembling. I told him not to tell you until we were sure. I froze. Not to tell me what? My gaze moved between them. Dylan's jaw was tight, like he was biting down on words he didn't want to say. Mom was wringing her hands together in her lap. The pit in my stomach, the one that had been twisting since I first saw his car, tightened even more. What's going on? I asked, my voice quieter now but sharper. They exchanged a look, one of those loaded glances where everything you need to know is hidden just out of reach. And that was when I realized, whatever was happening here, it wasn't just about Dylan or Mom. It was about both of them. I stayed standing by the sliding door, the lunch bag still in my hand like some ridiculous prop in a scene I didn't understand. My eyes moved from Mom to Dylan, waiting for one of them to speak, but the silence was so heavy it almost pressed against my chest. Finally, Dylan exhaled and gestured to the chair across from him. Haley, just sit. Please. I didn't move. Tell me what's going on first. He looked down at the table, and I followed his gaze. That's when I saw the envelopes again. Up close this time. They weren't just bills. They were hospital bills. Each one had my mother's name printed in the top corner, the amounts in bold type, ugly numbers with too many zeros. I blinked at them. You've been in the hospital? Mom's lips parted, but she didn't answer right away. She reached up, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she's had since I was a kid. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal, she said quietly. Just a few tests. Then some treatments. I didn't want you to worry until we knew how serious it was. The words, how serious, rattled around in my head like loose change. Serious? My voice cracked on the word. Her eyes dropped back to the envelopes. The insurance didn't cover everything. Actually, most of it. That's when Dylan spoke, his tone low and deliberate. I found out when your mom called me a few weeks ago. She didn't want to tell you yet, but the bills were piling up fast. Collection notices had already started coming in. My brain struggled to catch up. You knew about this? And you didn't tell me? His shoulders tensed. I was trying to help Haley. I thought maybe I could fix it before you had to know. I didn't want you to panic. I let out a short, humorless laugh. So you've been sneaking around, coming here when I'm at work, keeping secrets from me, and that's supposed to make me less panicked? Mom reached across the table toward me, her fingers trembling. I told him not to say anything yet. I thought maybe the first round of payments would cover enough to give me some breathing room. The room felt too warm now. My face was hot, but my hands were cold. I set the lunch bag down on the counter, suddenly unable to stand the feel of it in my grip. I scanned the rest of the table and noticed a thick manila folder beneath the bills. My gut told me it wasn't just more hospital paperwork. What's in there? I asked, pointing at it. Dylan hesitated. Then he pulled it out and slid it toward me. Inside were loan documents, pages and pages of them, stamped, signed, and dated. Right at the bottom of the first page was Dylan's signature. My eyes darted to the numbers, then to the collateral section. My stomach dropped. You took out a loan, I said slowly, each word tasting foreign in my mouth, against our house. Dylan opened his mouth, but I held up my hand to stop him. I wasn't done. And you did it without telling me. He rubbed the back of his neck, his gaze flickering between me and Mom. I didn't have a choice. Your mom needed the money now, not in 3 months. If I told you, you would have wanted to think about it, and there wasn't time. My head felt light, like the air in the room had thinned. So you made a decision that could risk our home without me. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say a word this time. It hit me then that this wasn't just about the bills or the loan. It was about trust. About the quiet agreements you think are unshakable in a marriage, and how fast they can be broken. And yet, despite the knot of anger twisting inside me, one thought kept circling back in my mind, refusing to be ignored. If Dylan was willing to risk that much for my mother, what else had he been hiding? I stood there, one hand still on the loan documents, the other gripping the back of a chair just to keep myself steady. The numbers blurred for a second, my vision clouding with the heat of it all. Anger, confusion, fear. Dylan leaned forward, his voice urgent now. I thought I could fix it before you found out. I was going to get extra work, maybe sell the truck. Sell the truck. I cut him off. Do you even hear yourself? This isn't some hobby you overpaid for, Dylan. This is our house. The place we live. The place we've built together for 7 years. He dropped his gaze, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles turned white. Mom finally spoke again, her voice breaking in the middle. I told him you'd be furious, Haley. I told him you'd feel betrayed. But I was going to lose my house. I didn't want to come live with you and be a burden. I shook my head slowly. So, instead, you both decided it was better to gamble with mine. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one moved. I pushed the papers back across the table, my fingers trembling. That's when an envelope slid loose from the stack and fluttered toward the edge. Dylan reached for it, but I was faster. It wasn't from the hospital. The return address was from the county clerk's office. I flipped it open, and the contents made my stomach twist all over again. It was a foreclosure notice. Not for Mom's property. 4 hours. I looked up at Dylan, my voice low but sharp as glass. You didn't just take out a loan. We're already behind on the mortgage? His jaw clenched, the tiniest flicker of panic crossing his face. I was covering the payments while also helping your mom. The medical bills, they wiped out more than I thought they would. I figured I could catch up before anything official happened, but now it's official. I finished for him. He looked at me then, and for a second I could almost see the man I married, the one who wanted to fix everything for everyone. But that image was clouded now, tangled in the wreckage of secrets he'd been keeping. Mom reached out like she might take my hand, but I pulled back. I couldn't stand the thought of comfort. Not from either of them.
Not yet.
The three of us sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, the only sound the hum of the old refrigerator. Eventually, I broke the silence. We're going to make a plan. We're going to figure out how to keep the house. But after this, things won't ever be the same. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet weight in my words said enough. That afternoon, we went through every envelope, every overdue notice, every statement. By the time the sun started to dip, we had a rough plan, selling Dylan's truck, listing the spare bedroom for rent, cutting every extra expense we could. But as we parted ways that evening, Mom at her kitchen door, Dylan walking silently to his car, I knew something had shifted in me. Because love can help you forgive a mistake. It can even help you carry someone else's debt. But trust? Trust, once broken, is a bill no one can fully pay.